At just 18 years old, Lamine Yamal is already living the kind of life most footballers spend decades chasing. Multi-million-dollar contracts, luxury brands lining up to sign him. A lifestyle fit for football royalty. But what does he actually spend his money on? And just how rich is Barcelona's teenage superstar? Let's step inside the incredible life of Lamine Yamal. Before the mansions and the supercars, there was Rocafonda, a working-class neighborhood in Matoro, just outside Barcelona, the kind of place the local press once described as forgotten, isolated, and stigmatized. That's where Lamine grew up, kicking a ball around cramped courtyards long before anyone knew his name. In a household with roots stretching to Morocco through his father and Equatorial Guinea through his mother. There was no red carpet waiting for him, just a park, a ball, and a family willing to drive him to every trial and every training session. His talent was undeniable almost immediately. He joined Barcelona's famed La Masia Academy as a child, tore through the youth ranks at a pace even the club's own scouts struggled to keep up with, and made his first team debut while still years away from being able to legally drive a car. He became the youngest player ever to appear for Barcelona in an official match, and shortly after, the youngest to ever play and score for the Spanish national team. Euro 2024 changed everything. A European Championship winner as a teenager. A Copa trophy for the best under-21 player in the world. A Ballon d'Or conversation that most players never enter in their entire careers. And in the summer of 2026, he added something even bigger to that resume, lifting the World Cup with Spain at just 19 years old. But here's where things get interesting. The money that came with all of that success is almost as staggering as the trophies themselves. Let's talk numbers. In 2025, just before his 18th birthday, Barcelona handed Lamine a long-term contract extension that runs until 2031. Reports place his base salary at somewhere between 15 and 20 million euros a year, which works out to roughly 320,000 euros a week, before a single bonus is added. To put that weekly figure in perspective, it's more than the average worker in most countries earns in an entire year, delivered to an 18-year-old every 7 days, and there are plenty of bonuses on top of that base number. Appearance fees, goal bonuses, trophy bonuses, stack them all up, and some reports suggest his total football income could climb toward 35 to 40 million euros in a single year. That figure reportedly places him above established teammates like Pedri and Gavi, both of whom have been at the club longer, and puts him within reach of Barcelona's very highest earners, players who've spent a decade proving themselves at the top level. To put it another way, that's more than most people would earn across several lifetimes, and he's not even old enough to rent a car in some countries. Barcelona also inserted a release clause into that contract, worth around 1 billion euros. Not to punish him, to scare off anyone who might try to take him away. Yet that's only part of the story, because his salary from football is far from the only place the money is coming from. Away from the pitch, Lamine has built one of the most valuable commercial portfolios in world football for someone his age. It started with Adidas, who signed him as an ambassador back in early 2024, and later handed him something almost no teenager in football history has ever received: permission to wear a boot line connected to Lionel Messi himself. That Adidas partnership alone is reportedly worth tens of millions of euros over its lifetime. But he didn't stop there. Beats by Dre brought him in as a brand ambassador, putting him in campaigns alongside names like LeBron James, and reportedly paying him around $1 million a year just to be the face of their headphones. Then came Coca-Cola's Powerade, the smartphone giant Oppo, the video game franchise Konami, and the payments company Visa. And it gets even crazier, because in January of 2026, American Eagle signed him to a 5-year global ambassador deal, its very first multi-year partnership with an athlete, just months before he became a World Cup champion. Added all together, and endorsements alone are estimated to bring in somewhere around $10 million a year. Combine that with his football salary, and some financial trackers put his total earnings, before taxes and agent fees, at over $40 million across the past 12 months. That would already rank him among the 10 highest paid soccer players on the planet. And remember, he's still a teenager. So where does all of that money actually go? The real surprise isn't a mansion for himself. It's what he did for the people who raised him. Long before he could legally sign most contracts on his own, Lamine was already buying homes for his family. Reports describe him purchasing a house for his grandmother near his old neighborhood in Rocafonda, a place tied directly to where his story began. He bought his mother a home nearby as well, keeping the family close together, even as his life changed at lightning speed. His father's house was placed in Barcelona itself, closer to where Lamine trains and plays. None of these were flashy trophy purchases. They were deliberate, emotional decisions, rooted in loyalty to the people who supported him before the world was watching. That's when everything changed, because as his career kept climbing, so did his own living situation. For years, Lamine lived under the same roof as his family, first at La Masia, then in an apartment near Barcelona's training complex, a setup required in part because he was still legally a minor. But in 2026, once he'd turned 18, he made a move that turned heads across Spain. He purchased a sprawling estate in Esplugues de Llobregat, a wealthy area just outside Barcelona, previously owned by former Barcelona captain Gerard Piqué and global superstar Shakira. The property, reportedly valued in the region of 11 million euros, includes 6 bedrooms, 5 bathrooms, an indoor pool, an outdoor pool, and a second smaller villa for guests. It sits just minutes from Barcelona's training ground, where teammates like Alejandro Balde and Ronald Araujo happen to live in the very same neighborhood. He didn't move away from the club that made him. He moved closer to it. The real surprise came off the pitch in other ways too, because Lamine's relationship with cars has become almost as talked about as his footwork. For a long time, coverage of his garage genuinely outpaced his actual driving license, since he couldn't legally get behind the wheel until relatively recently. That gap between the cars linked to him and his ability to drive them became something of a running joke among Spanish football media. Once he did earn his license, reports linked him to a growing list of vehicles, from an Audi RS6 Avant, described as his more understated, practical option for slipping back into his old neighborhood without drawing too much attention, to high-performance machines like a Ferrari 296 GTB, valued at close to $400,000, and reportedly gifted to himself as an 18th birthday present, and an Audi RS7 Sportback with well over 600 horsepower under the hood. Some reports have also linked him to a McLaren Artura, a Porsche 911 GT3 RS, and, more recently, to one of the most exclusive hypercars on the planet, a machine that costs more than most houses. It's important to be upfront here. Lamine himself has never publicly confirmed ownership of most of these vehicles, and the figures circulating online vary wildly depending on the source, sometimes by hundreds of thousands of dollars for the exact same car. What's consistent across the reporting, though, is the pattern: a young athlete building a collection that mixes hybrid performance cars with more low-key practical options for the days he just wants to disappear into traffic and go home like anyone else. Yet that's only part of the story, because fashion and accessories have become another way Lamine expresses who he is. He's leaned into custom jewelry collaborations with the Spanish brand Tujaz, famously wearing star motif dental braces during a Clásico that fans still talk about. His deal with American Eagle put him at the center of streetwear campaigns, aimed squarely at a younger, global audience, while his Adidas Originals partnership has tied him to a high-profile SP5 streetwear collaboration ahead of the World Cup. Even his boots carry meaning beyond performance. He still wears the number 304 on them, a tribute to the postal code of Rocafonda, the neighborhood that raised him. His team has reportedly trademarked that number across multiple product categories through 2035. It's a small detail, but it tells you everything about how he thinks. The money changed. The zip code on his shoes didn't. In June of 2026, on the very day the World Cup kicked off, UNICEF announced Lamine as its newest Goodwill ambassador, one of the youngest people in the organization's history to receive that title. There's a poetic detail buried in that announcement. Back in 2007, when Lamine was just 5 months old, his family won a raffle to appear in a UNICEF calendar, and the photograph that resulted showed a 20-year-old Lionel Messi holding baby Lamine in his arms. 2 decades later, both men became UNICEF ambassadors, and in the summer of 2026, they walked out onto the same pitch to contest a World Cup final. In his new role, Lamine has committed to championing children's right to play and supporting kids living through conflict and humanitarian crises, building on smaller gestures he'd already made, like writing a public letter to his younger brother about hope for children everywhere, and handing his social media accounts over for a day to a 9-year-old girl from Equatorial Guinea, his mother's home country, so she could show the world what her daily life actually looks like. But his biggest purchase wasn't a car or a watch at all. It was security for the people who mattered to him, long before he had the resources most players wait until their late 20s to accumulate. And that raises the real question hanging over this entire story. What happens from here? If Lamine Yamal continues on his current trajectory, the financial comparisons to the greatest players in history start to feel less like exaggeration and more like inevitability. Kylian Mbappé won a World Cup at 19 back in 2018 and became the face of Nike almost overnight, later adding a luxury watch partnership with Hublot and landing the cover of EA Sports' flagship game. Cristiano Ronaldo, still marketed as one of the most valuable athletes on the planet, boasts a lifetime deal with Nike, reportedly worth close to $1 billion, along with a social media following that stretches past 1 billion people. Messi didn't lift a World Cup until he was 35, yet it transformed his brand into something historic, cementing decades-long partnerships with Adidas and eventually a headline-grabbing move to Inter Miami alongside Apple. Erling Haaland, meanwhile, has built one of the fastest-growing commercial portfolios in the sport, purely through consistent, relentless goal scoring at Manchester City. Lamine has already matched the World Cup milestone at 18, a year earlier than Mbappé managed it, with contracts, endorsements, and a winner's medal arriving years ahead of schedule compared to nearly every icon who came before him. Marketing analysts already believe his commercial value is positioned to eventually rival Messi, Ronaldo, and Mbappé at their respective peaks. Not purely because of hype, but because the timeline is compressing faster than it ever has for a player this young. It's an extraordinary thing, watching someone barely out of his teenage years already reshape what success in football is supposed to look like. The houses he bought before he could legally sign most of the paperwork himself, the number stitched into his boots that refuses to let him forget where he came from. The trophy cabinet that's already fuller than some players manage across an entire career. Lamine Yamal isn't just living a luxury life, he's rewriting the timeline for what that life is even supposed to take to build. And if this is what 18 looks like, the rest of the story is going to be worth watching. Thank you for watching till the end. Consider subscribing to this channel so you don't miss any of our exploratory videos that we'll be dropping. See you in the next one.